Welcome to the Culture of Agriculture, brought to you by Sputnik Equipment. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's The Culture of Agriculture with Sputnik Equipment. Today we're excited to have Jim Chapman with us, and he is with Chapman Seed and Consulting, LLC.
Yes, sir.
And we're grateful for your time today. I know this is a busy time of season, and in fact, you just got off a phone call with a grower.
I did.
Probably consulting some things, especially with this interesting year. But
yes.
If you would like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about it, I'm Brent Rigby. I'll be the host today, and just appreciate having the opportunity to be with you.
Absolutely. I feel humbled and privileged to be here, Brent. So, born and raised in, well, not born, but raised in American Falls from the time I was in kindergarten, and my father and grandfather and great grandfather before me were potato growers and sugar beet growers, and so I think it was 1977. I rented 10 acres of flood irrigated ground from my neighbor. I was in high school, and took a 1967 Chevy one-ton truck, drove to Ashton. I had potato seed, bought it in bags. They would bag up, 1-ton truck worth of seed for me, and I'd drive it back on Friday night, and I'd plant spuds on Saturday and Sunday, and get one of my high school buddies to ride. I had a 2-row John Deere pick planter I bought from the neighbor for I think $50. I polished the picks up, and anyway, that was how I got started farming. I went to college in engineering, and then came back to the farm in 1984 and started raising potatoes and cattle, and we had a hay and grain operation. My family farm was 160 acres. We still live on that today. It was something my great-grandfather had purchased. And so farmed until 96. In 1997, I went to work for Amalgamated Sugar as an agronomist. The co-op had just been formed, and the Liberty area had bought in. They hadn't raised beets other than Mike Driscoll, who had continued to raise beets and freight them to Aberdeen, but everybody else was kind of new growers. And so Amalgamated threw me into that fire. They hired me, and so I kind of got the beets going here in Liberty, and worked for Amalgamated Sugar for 9 years for the co-op, and then I started my own business, Chapman Seed and Consulting, and we've been doing that now for, I think this is the 17th year. And in 2014, I started a second company with a grower up here in Blackfoot called Desert Sunset Ag, and we started building dikers to go on sugar beet planters, row crop planters, grain drills, spuds, things like that. So I come from an interesting perspective because
You've been on both sides.
I worked on I raised sugar beets for Amalgamated, and it was Amalgamated Sugar, not the Snake River Co-op at the time, and then joined the co-op, and then went to work for the co-op as an agronomist, and now I consult on sugar beets and corn.
So do you work quite a bit with the co-op?
I do. I have a great relationship. I mean, they've got a great agronomy staff. I mean, we've got in the Upper Snake, we have Troy Warner, Brandon Bowen, and Chase Williams. Great guys, really professional in their approach. Amalgamated has made under the leadership of Pat Laubacher, who came on. I don't know how long Pat's been here, but he took the co-op from the agronomy side and really transformed it into I think just a top-notch from a co-op supporting the growers' point of view. I mean, they're doing a lot more research. They've got programs that growers can get on and on their phone and log information in, such as fertilizer applications and seed and things like that. And they're getting information back. When I worked for Amalgamated, they collected a lot of information.
Yeah.
And my God, once you turned it in, it never went anywhere. And that's the thing about information. It doesn't do you any good to collect it if you're not willing to go through it over the winter and find out, it doesn't matter whether it's, programs like Climate View or Field View, which are great programs. I mean, they'll collect a lot of information, but you have to dive into it after the season if it's going to be of value of collecting it. And that's kind of what Pat Laubacher did with Amalgamated Sugar. And now they've got a VP of Ag, Brody Griffin, he's an outstanding young man. I mean, the growers speak very highly of him, and I think the world of him. I mean, they have a great staff. I work really well with them. They invite us to their research days to set up our Diker display. We're one of the few, if not the only, commercial companies that are invited to their research field day. So yes, I have a tremendous. Yeah, I worked for them for 9 years. I have a lot of friends there, and I just have a great relationship with the co-op, and they've done very well.
It has been interesting over the years how that's changed.
Oh yeah.
And how you just can't jump into a beet.
Oh no.
You can't just jump in and start planting beets today.
No.
You've got to be in that organization to be able to even.
Yeah, that's what really makes sugar beets unique in the United States is that they're all cooperative owned, and so you don't have this issue with high. We get some high sugar beet prices. The co-op sets the acreage, and you can go ahead and grow sugar beets. Anybody's welcome to grow sugar beets, but they're not going to sell them.
That's right.
They don't have a home for them to go, and so it really is. It's a very solid industry. Back in 1996, 97, when the co-op was formed, beet shares in the Upper Snake cross company sold for about $400 a share. A share gave you the right to raise 1 acre. Now in the Upper Snake, if you could find some to purchase, I think you would be close to 4,000.
It's really changed in that part.
It is,
and they're really sought after if they
come up.
Oh man,
yeah, it is.
It's been one of the commodities that is very even keel, and you kind of know your inputs going in there, and you kind of know what your return's going to be, especially with yield potential that we have today compared
it's incredible.
to 20, 30 years ago.
Well, I think the bankers really like sugar beets. I mean, there's a saying out there that says the potatoes buy the Cadillacs, but the sugar beets pay the mortgages.
They keep things going.
And that's, there's a lot of truth to that.
And the wheat, we just kind of.
Yeah, the wheat's, it's good now. There's a lot more attention being paid to wheat this year and thank God, it's really nice being in this critical water shortage that we're facing right now with the drought, that we have, a commodity like wheat that we can raise, and just it wasn't that many years ago you couldn't make any money at it.
No. Well, going back into the 80s and the 90s, we struggled with.
I tell you
wheat
what,
prices.
In 1985, I think I sold wheat for like $1.96 or something like that. It was terrible.
I remember that.
And they had the set aside program and the PIC program and.
Yeah, you were just hoping the government paid enough to keep you going.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice to see. It's just good for. It's good for all of us. It's good for Sputnik. It's good for Chapman Seed and Desert Sunset Ag, and the pickup dealers and all the equipment dealers when agriculture does well.
Yeah.
And so and I think that our point of view. And I've always taken this approach. I grew up on a farm, so I farmed and worked for the co-op, and now with Chapman Seed. I think it's always and that's what I tell my kids and my employees. I say, listen, it's always in our best interest to help these guys do the very best they can. Yes. If even if we've got to give up short-term profit. We've got to look down the road, and because we've been here 17 years. I hope we're here, 70 more. But to do that, we need to make sure that our customer base is successful.
Yeah, when they're successful, the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the exciting part, even in a community. It seems like in a community where the farming is lively and it's going, that dollar turns 3, 4, 5 times. For every dollar they make, and it's huge for all of us.
Yeah. That's my dad who served in the potato industry for his career. I've served in the sugar beet industry, but his notion was if you need an economic stimulus, don't give it to automakers, just give it to farmers.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
they're going to spend it.
They will spend it. So that's.
Well, no, it's great. Thank you for kind of giving us a history of where you've been and where you've come. And like I said, we're really excited to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
We're going to kind of visit a lot about sugar beets today, which I think is, like I said, an exciting crop.
It is.
I guess one of the questions maybe out of the gate is, how do you feel last year went? What did you see kind of special? I know we had some interesting circumstances with heat. Kind of how did the crop begin? Obviously last spring to kind of through the summer, and then we'll go into kind of this year. But how did you feel last year went, and some of the things that we need to be looking for this year?
The thing that was probably the biggest challenge I felt for sugar beets going into the spring was we didn't have any submoisture. I mean, we were, I've been, chasing sugar beets for 30 some years now, raising them and tending after them as a field man and consulting on them. And I had never seen a spring where we came out with our soil moisture profile so low. I mean, we were just dry. I mean, we were, we didn't have any winter moisture. Yeah. We were, we went in and the fields didn't work up well. And we got started off. We had a really beautiful first couple 10 days. Yep. And Easter, I remember we were talking about, we had the family, we had the grandkids over for Easter this year, and we were like, last Easter we were out in the backyard. It was, yep. a couple weeks earlier, and the kids were running around in T-shirts, and this Easter we hid the eggs in the house because it was cold.
It was cold.
And yep. So we started off really good, but we didn't have much moisture, so we were fighting, getting the planters, getting our depth, because sugar beets, you want them, a half an inch, no deeper than 3/4. So you're talking, and when it's dry,
it dries that part out quick.
It's really difficult. So we were getting beets in, and we were turning the water on them and putting the water to them so that we could get them going, and then it turned off cold, and we lost, a few thousand. I think it was the 5th of April last year was the date. Everything that was planted before the 5th, there were a few exceptions, but pretty much everything before the 5th of April had to be replanted. But after that, they came up. But April was cold and May was cold. I mean, we were off on growing degree days, and we got to the end of May, and we had a frost, and it'd been cold, and then 3 days later,
we're just hot.
Oh man, it is like somebody flipped the switch. And we had been digging in the beet fields, and we were, with our guys, we're out there when they start working, and we're watching the packers and kind of helping them get those set, and then we get the planter set. So we were well aware of what the water. So we were running 4.5, 5-hour sets across the beets, running 4-hour sets with 2 rolls, or 3.5-hour sets with 2 rolls. So we were trying to sock some sub in
to get going.
Every time we went across, we were like, we need to add a little bit. And but even then, when June hit, we were barely where we needed to be, barely. And man, all of a sudden the systems went on, and we consoled on corn too. And we had kind of the same issue with corn, man. Once we got it in the ground, and we pre-irrigate corn, but once June hit, man, those systems ran and never stopped. We just could not get a day off. And I don't know what the measurable precipitation was in June and
It wasn't.
June and July, but it, you know, where I live, it was less than 1/10 of an inch.
Yeah, it was
and
next to nothing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so, but
Going back to what you're talking, you're trying to catch up. Obviously, we have hand lines, wheel lines, pivots, some of that. What systems did you see work the best last year?
you know, there's, I don't know that it's so much a system. You know, pivots will work great if they're packaged right, and if they're run correctly.
Yes.
You know, a lot of guys, I think the biggest mistake a lot of guys made last year that had pivots that I saw was they would go out with 1/3 of an inch, or, you know,
Go too fast.
and go too fast. And man, they put 1/3 of an inch down, and the way the wind blew last year, it was gone before the pivot got back around there again. And so we had some, you know, there's dry sprout, which what happens is you know, at a half an inch deep to 3/4 of an inch deep with a beet seed, you get water to it and you get the germ started, and then the wind blows and it dries it out. And that radicle that emerges is, you know, it's smaller than a human hair. And if it doesn't
Get out of the ground, it doesn't make it.
If it does not get moisture, it will dry up and die. And so we had, you know, we lost some acres later on in the season, not to frost, but the guys, yeah, and I, you know, I've always told guys, man, once you put that beet seed in the ground, you're committed. Don't look at the wind. I mean, you got to get water on there, because if you don't get water on them, the mice will get them, because we do have mice, you know, especially if there's habitat around, you know, rock piles or canal right-of-ways or train tracks, you know, the mice will come out. It's interesting. I have been in beet fields where the mice have gone down every 5.5 inches, plucked every seed out, shelled it out like we do sunflower seeds. A full half mile. One end of the field that come out on the canal bank and take that row. 2 rows next to it are fine, and then the third one, their buddy got on. It's amazing what they can do.
You wouldn't think they'd go that far, would you?
No, they're incredible. I mean, they can, and dry conditions make you even more susceptible. Water is a great preventative action for mice.
So did you see more mice action last year then?
Most of our guys they've seen enough mice to last a lifetime. And there's always some, you know, and you know, the windy conditions, guys get frustrated because they know they need to irrigate, but they don't want to irrigate. And so it's kind of a catch-22. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And so, you know, flip a coin. But, you know.
The important part is keep the water going.
Yeah, you got to.
Especially in those conditions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And the nice thing usually about hand lines and wheel lines, you put those sets, but you can also have a wind skip on those.
Right, you can pick them up. Yeah. So, yeah, but you know, when we're consulting with pivots, and we have guys that, you know, do very well on both pivots and wheel lines. We don't have too many hand lines, you know, in Sugarbeets.
They're starting to disappear.
Yeah, they were there when I was in high school. I can tell you that. I packed a lot of those 4-inch ball and socket around. I couldn't wait for football to start because I could convince Dad to let me have a night off. But
I always said that's what kept us in shape, so we could.
I could go to football and it was easy. You know, it was way better than moving pipe.
Yes, it was.
But yeah, it's so yeah. When we fire water up on a pivot, we want to try and put as much on as we can without running.
Yes.
And
usually you kind of get that in the first part of the season.
Right. Because it seems that once every time you irrigate, you're going to put a little less on with a pivot, and then there's a transition there. All of a sudden, you know, in late May or early June, all of a sudden now we can go. But early season, boy, I mean, if you start out with 1/3 of an inch, man,
you start to seal that top off.
You start to seal that top off, and you're going to be in trouble, especially on a spring like last year.
And soil conditions kind of makes a change. Difference
absolutely.
on that as well. But.
Yeah. So, and you know, it's interesting, you know, in my lifetime, even back when I was amalgamated field man 20 years ago, a lot of guys follow spuds, and we were plowing everything. Well, virtually now we we just don't plow any of our dirt. Some guys still do, especially if they've had to go in with a rescue treatment on spuds or something like that. We want to get that chemical down so we can get that beet established to where it can synthesize the chemical load that may be present in the soil. But we've gone more to ripping and
kind of like what, kind of more of the potato.
getting more
ready.
yeah. And a lot of these sugar beet growers are potato growers,
guys,
and they're like, I don't like that plow, That's
a slow process.
It is, and so but there's been some consequences to that too, because I think that we see more dirt move in the valley now than we did, because you can run your DMI or Ripper or a Lemkin and you work some soil down, but it's nothing like bringing the bottom up to the top. And so we've ended up with this soil on top that's just been topsoil for a long time, and the structure's changed on it. And back in the 90s, we had crust busters. Every beet grower had a crust buster.
You go out,
because ground would get tightened up, and you'd run that crust buster just as those beets were under the ground, give them a crack to get through. We don't.
With the way we're doing now, we don't crust near as bad because we've got. Would you say we're doing better as far as an organic matter on top with that soil doing that?
I think organic matter levels have increased. The problem is we've accumulated a lot of fine soil on top, and that's what I was in Raft River this morning about 8:30, and coming back, there was dirt moving
because of the wind.
Because of the wind, and we see fields that didn't move 20 years ago, and it's okay. I mean, we're learning how to manage that, but it's a different challenge than we had in the days when it was crusting. I mean, agriculture just evolves, and
it keeps
there's this domino effect or the butterfly effect, whatever. You do one thing and it just kind of ripples through the whole farm, and good and bad things can come from it.
Yes.
So,
in fact, that's why we kind of keep records and kind of look at what we do, and like
that
you were saying
information
earlier,
collection,
so that we can analyze that at the end.
Yep.
So what? So kind of finishing up on last year.
Okay.
As far as through the summer and harvest wise, any?
We the growing degree days just they took off, and we look good. Everything looked really good going into August, and one of the things that got us in the sugar beet industry was we had this mindset of water because we were just behind, and we didn't want to shut the water off. And all of a sudden, about the 10th or 15th of August, we got rain, and it was a lot of rain. And between an inch to I had guys raising corn up in Firth that I recorded 2.6 inches up there, and it was kind of variable, but it was an inch plus. And we were already starting to catch up. The beets were starting to slow down, and the spuds were starting to slow down, and we got wet, which isn't usually a big deal in August. You can just shut the water off, and we'll dry back out. But not only did we get wet, we got overcast, and then the smoke rolled in.
Yep.
And that canopy was humid, and it stayed humid, and we found Cercospora.
Really?
Yep. And I'll tell you what, and for those that don't know about Cercospora, it is the most detrimental, damaging disease in sugar beets worldwide. It can take a crop of beets. There were guys down in western Idaho who didn't recognize it, didn't get a fungicide on soon enough, and put 5 or 6 fungicides on in the field, still went brown. It's a foliar disease, and we've been very blessed here in Idaho that we've not had to deal with it.
We're usually drier.
Our climate is not favorable to that, but it was. The unfortunate part about it is Cercospora. We had 4 guys scouting within Chapman Seed, and fields we scouted. We tried to get into every field in the Upper Snake, and see if we could find Cercospora. And we did. I mean, it was in every field in the Upper Snake. So you're talking 38,000 acres and a fairly good load of inoculum. So it's going to be something we're going to have to deal with probably.
So we'll probably see it, or possibility of seeing it this coming year.
Oh, I think so. I mean, if conditions, if they get right at any point in time, we're going to want to get some fungicides on and
be prepared.
Give some protection, because it is.
That's one of the things that we're probably going into this coming year's crop. We probably need to kind of prepare for.
Oh yeah, we've already talked to growers about that in our consulting group, and said, hey, get some fungicide lined up. You better plan for at least 2 applications. You get out into, in Minnesota and the Red River Valley, it's been a devastating disease. Now, fortunately, we have some sugar beet seed companies here in North America that have been able to stay on top of this, and so they've brought out Cercospora resistant varieties that seem to perform very well there. Since we haven't had Cercospora, we're going to be 2-3 years out, maybe more, before we get some varieties here that have that tolerance. So we're going to have to learn to deal with this for a little bit without protection genetically in our beets.
Which sometimes it keeps a guy on his toes to scout that and see it. And be on top of that. So that was one of the challenges, it sounds like, last year. And going into this year, we're going to have. It's going to
continue. Yep, we're going to be into July, 1st August. Guys are going to want to watch for those conditions, which is nighttime temps over 60 and daytime highs in the mid 80s and humidity, and try to get those canopies dried out.
So what kind of yield loss, when you're talking about that coming in when we had it this last year, what kind of yield losses were those attributed to?
So the co-op definitely, and having worked with the co-op, the field staff turn their estimates in about the first week of August. They give the yield estimates, and then the company plans everything out from there. I mean, okay, we need to start early harvest now because we're going to have X amount of tons, and so all of those estimates went in and all those plans were put in, and then we got, not only did we have Cercospora, I've never seen spider mites in the valley like what we had last year. It was incredible. I mean, we were treating beets for Cercospora, for powdery mildew, for spider mites.
Wow.
And they took their toll. I mean, I think between the smoke and the Cercospora and the spider mites in the Upper Snake, it probably trimmed 1.25 tons to 1.5 tons off of 38,000 acres.
That's a pretty good chunk.
That's not a bad chunk. I mean, that's, and it could have been more. I mean, it was
but that's kind of estimate.
Yeah, I would say 1 ton to 1.5 tons.
Wow, that is quite a bit.
It is. You're talking, 70.
What would spider mites? Did you contribute that to the weather?
Weather conditions, yeah. And I don't know where the heck they all came from. I would love to sit down with an entomologist and say, in 30 plus years, I've treated maybe 3 fields for spider mites. And this past year, we treated almost all of them.
Wow. Well, here's a question. In the corn, you see the spider mites come in the corn.
We do.
I had the experience with a chopper. We were out there chopping that night and came back the next morning. It was orange. Of course, not knowing what I was doing. You jumped into work on it. And next thing you know, it was not a good day.
Yeah.
Do you think that has anything to do with a little bit more spider mite because the corn does attract those, or?
I mean, we've kind of dealt with it in the corn, and we have some years where we have spider mites, and years that we don't. Last year was definitely, one of the worst years, probably the worst year I've seen in corn. And
you saw it in both.
Both. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We had a plot up at a dairy in Firth, and we got into a variety, and the operator plugged the machine up, and so we were in on the processor, and I was helping him get it cleaned out, and I drove from Firth to home, and I could feel those things crawling all over me, and literally down to the last article of clothing, I found spider mites on my body. My wife was vacuuming the bedroom as I'm getting ready to get in the shower, and I was just like, this is unreal. It's just,
they multiply fast.
Oh man, they really do. Yeah, you look at their life cycle in 3 days. They're laying eggs, and it's a lot of them. Yeah, they just they're a tough cookie to handle.
Now they're here. They're probably going to be here. That might be another one that's going to be depending upon weather conditions this year.
Yeah, the thing about Cercospora, though, and so we had some when we first saw Cercospora up here. We contacted some breeders, and one of our breeders. I sell beta seed, and they were coming down for OVT, and so we got a gal by the name of Tiffany. She's an outstanding individual, brilliant young woman that just understands everything, and she's kind of spearheads a little bit of beta seeds Cercospora breeding program, and what I really had not seen it before, and not to the level we were seeing it. And I said, so tell me about this stuff. Is this going to be a problem? And she said, Jim, if your guys knew what they were looking at, they would spray everything now, and they would plow every acre of beets this fall. And I'm like, because the leaf will, the organic matter, and to make matters worse, she goes, do you know where we get our inoculum for our Cercospora trials? And I said, no. And she went out and she picked a few leaves, and she goes, pick leaves like this, and we throw them in a bag, and we throw them in the freezer. We pull them out in the spring, we grind them up, and we use a bandy applicator, granular applicator, and we just go down the rows and we put them on the beets.
And that, because it's in the leaf.
Yeah. Well, it's just that dry matter. Yeah, completely dry, frozen.
Wow.
She goes, yeah, the only way you're going to get rid of this inoculum is if everybody plows their beets under. Wow. And of course, that's not going to happen. Yeah. We were talking about that earlier. Guys don't want to plow.
That's right.
We'll rip it in. We'll deal with that problem later. And we very well may have to if conditions present themselves this fall, because we're going to have plenty of inoculum around.
Yeah, because I doubt we plowed last fall.
Dang few.
A few.
Yeah, dang few.
Going in from harvest-wise, I mean, harvest seemed to move right along.
Wasn't quite as many tons or trucks in line. It did move along fairly smoothly. And
so as far as what you heard to finish the year, at least for this co-op, they were down a little bit more than what they expected.
Down, yeah, a little bit more than they expected, but we got, again, an excellent crop. I mean, sugars were in the 18s, and tonnage was, solid. I mean, it was, I think the co-op averaged around 40 ton, and it was a good crop. Good crop. Processed very well. They finished that up here 10 days ago or so, and so it was an
very
excellent
pleased
crop.
with what came in last year. Yep. So sugar's high. Was that contributed a little bit to the early heat, you think?
The sugar percent, hey, there's a lot of factors that go into, good sugar. I mean, the breeding is definitely, we've just got some really good varieties from these seed companies. I mean, they are just, really good varieties, and they process well, and of course, amalgamated. Most co-ops, I think all co-ops do this. They have a seed, what they call a seed alliance, and they set some parameters and some bars and some, these are things if you want approval, because you can have a great variety that, gives a guy 60 ton and 16.5 sugar and recovers at 88 or 89%. Amalgamated saying, yeah, you're not selling that. We need recoveries up, we need sugar up, we need ERS per ton up, those things that make the co-op more efficient and make the growers more money. And so, the seed companies working with the Seed Alliance, they've been able to deliver some really, really good sugar beets.
So in that Seed Alliance, like you say, they do have some criteria that
absolutely.
they kind of put. So what kind of recoveries? I mean, when you're talking recoveries, what would they like to see?
Oh, they'd love to see 100%. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, you get 91, 92%, you know, and you know, and of course the co-op, man, back when I was a field man, 3 days a week, we crawled those stupid piles and walked, you know, 200 feet, and we would drive conduit 6 feet down, and I'd attach a thermometer on a string and cork it, because if water got in there, it'd freeze the thermometer in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You'd pull that up and read your temperatures and write it in your book, and 3 times a week, and you'd send those numbers off to the co-op. Now they fly them, and they're infrared, and the huge, the big thing that they do is they go in and strip these piles. It gets frost, they get rain, they go pull those sides down, and they get those through the factory. And I mean, the co-op is.
So that's made quite a difference.
Oh, it's huge.
Since they've done that, the recovery rate's better.
I look at beets that they were taken out the end of March, still in the piles, and they look like they were put in there 3 weeks ago. It is really incredible.
Well, I noticed that they've been putting air to them.
Yep, ventilated piles, huge difference.
That's been kind of a new thing over what, the last 6, 7?
Oh no, we've had ventilated piles well before that, you know, and back, I was still field man. They put the storages, huge storages up down there. If you haven't seen that, that's impressive, Brent. I mean, they're big. I mean, they pull those green trains in there and they just turn them around in those buildings.
Oh wow,
it's cool. It is. It's impressive. I mean, and you know, if I sound like I'm proud of this co-op, I am. I mean, this. I tell you what, I think, you know, the talk, you know, when Amalgamated got started was that Red River Valley, their co-op, American Crystal. We don't have to bow our heads when we're in their presence. We're as good a cooperative there is in the United States.
And that's exciting that we've got such strong sugar markets in all these areas.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's
and the sugar program, you know, has a lot to do with that. It's a great program, no cost to the taxpayer, and but it keeps, you know, that foreign sugar that's being dumped as countries subsidize their own growers, and it protects our industry, protects our jobs, protects my job, your job. You know, I know you guys are in the spud business, but I'll tell you what, Brent.
We're moving into the beet business.
Well, I know you guys are. You have some great equipment running out there. You know, the guys speak highly of it. But imagine if, I mean, so in 2007, the co-op harvested 117,000 acres of beets, and they were around $30 a ton, or well, projected to be around 34. And you know, now we plant 180, you know, ballpark. Depends on you know, water and all those other conditions. But imagine if the, you know, like back in the 70s when the U.S. government decided we don't need a sugar program, and you know, so many, you know, UNI sugar, and there were just mills in Texas, so many closed down. And you know, the sugar price dropped, and then all of a sudden went back up to 60 some cents, which was, you know, incredible back then. That's and so they, you know, and of course, obviously, all the companies, the sugar users who had lobbied to get the world sugar, lobbied to get a sugar program so that they could get cheap sugar again. They were not cheap,
kind of went both sides.
Fair sugar, yeah. But you know, and so you take 180,000 acres of sugar beets out of Idaho.
Oh,
what's going to happen to our spud industry?
Well, because that becomes the cash crop part.
That's a row crop dirt.
Yes,
that's a row crop dirt. That's
it's
good
solid
dirt. Yep,
and it's solid, and it gives us a good rotation. I think
excellent rotation.
That's one of the things, and maybe we'll hit on that real quick. Rotation, as far as, I mean, we need good rotation with potatoes, even wheat, barley, sugar beets. We need a rotation so it kicks it out of some of these diseases that we will build up on. What would you recommend on a rotation with sugar beets?
You know, ideally, so there's a couple of schools of thoughts here. So I will talk from a processor's point of view. I would like to see probably potatoes and wheat, sugar beets, and wheat, a 4-year rotation, and then back to potatoes. From a grower's perspective, when you're talking about $7, $10, $14,000 per acre ground that you got to make a payment on that's got to support itself, or rents where they're at. A lot of guys are on a potato, sugar beet, wheat, and that challenges the co-op in some regards. They've had some struggles with that, because from a grower's point of view, the advantage is I can capture that nitrogen, because sugar beets will go down 1, 2, 3 feet, and they'll grab those groceries that were left over from the spuds. And so on a year like this, where fertilizer prices are, you got nitrogen at $1 plus, and so the guys that are following spuds are like, whew, but at the same time, we're getting some soil tests back that, we've got an extra 40 or an extra 80 or sometimes even an extra 100 units of nitrogen following a spud crop. Now we've got to deal with that and still make the PTJP, at least be at the average or higher, so our growers don't get deducted, and conductivity's down and things like that. And the growers going, well, I'm if I get dinged a little bit, it's okay, because I've saved all this fertilizer cost. And so our job as crop consultants is okay, let's manage this crop so that we don't, so that our grower doesn't get penalized by the co-op, so that the co-op has what they need to make money, and we don't hammer the aquifer. I mean, we don't want to just put water to it and flush the nitrogen. So we go into the growing season aware of what we've got to deal with, and we kind of address that later in the fall.
That's what makes it nice, probably following grain.
Grain, yep.
Is you
much
can kind
easier.
of manage that fertilizer a little easier, because it's kind of pulled that down to a level.
Well, and you have to add fertilizer. So we got guys that are putting 100 to 150 units on of nitrogen on grain for their beets. Some requirements were even a little higher than that. And so, and then that complicates things even further for growers, because they don't like to plow and they don't want to work deep. So you go out there and put 150 units of nitrogen or 175 units of nitrogen on the top of your ground, and you run a packer across it twice, you got 150 units in that seed zone. And so now you've got to address that too. I mean, because of the salts and everything else and like I say, that beet, when it emerges, it's the size of a heron. So what, there's pros and cons to both sides of the issue, and really it comes down to, and I'm biased. I deal with them all. I think we have the best sugar beets in North America in this end of the state. And there's, I shouldn't say this, there's a lot of great growers down at the other end of the state. I know these personally, and I know a lot of those guys down at the other end of the state. So I will say I honestly believe we have the best sugar beets growers in North America in amalgamated sugar.
How they're handling it.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think some of that comes, like you say, we're used to row crop too.
Right. Yeah. We're dealing with spuds and so we're.
What do you recommend a lot of growers do a starter fertilizer on the beets as they go, or most of it?
Absolutely not. So the thing, beets are unique. I mean, it's not like grain or potato or wheat. You throw, or corn that you throw on the ground and it absorbs moisture. A beet is that shell that it's in is just it's hard. I mean, it's difficult to cut open with a knife, and it does not absorb moisture. It is impenetrable. It's encased in an impenetrable shell, and there's this little thing called a basal pore that runs from the germ to the outside shell, and it's extraordinarily small. That's the only place water and oxygen can get into the germ to get it started.
Okay.
So you put corn in the ground, a little more moisture comes all the way into it, or wheat or potatoes. They're pulling the moisture. This beet seed, so seed soil contact becomes very important, which is very difficult to do at 1/2 inch.
Yep.
Again, but you get seed, there's a few places that can bring beets up when they're more than 1 inch deep. We're not one of them. You get beets over an inch deep in eastern Idaho.
You'll
be lucky to see half of them ever again.
Oh wow! They just do not.
They just, it's a small germ. I tell guys, I go, listen, a sugar beet's powered by a AAA battery that just got pulled out of your kid's favorite Christmas toy that's run nonstop for a month and a half.
And it's only got a little left.
And there is not a lot of juice left in that. Now take your potato or your corn seed or your wheat. They're powered by a small nuclear reactor. So that's what we're dealing with here. So you want to give that little battery the best chance that it has, and to do that, it's put it in the ground, plant it shallow, and get it water and get it
going.
coming, because man, if it sprouts and it has to live off of that germ, it won't make it very long.
And then there's a certain period of time too that it's very susceptible to frost, anything like that.
Oh, we've already got frozen beets, Brant. Yeah,
we're already coming into this year. That takes us right into this year a little bit.
Yep.
What are you seeing so far? I mean, we've got guys that probably started the 1st of April.
Yeah, into March, and we got some beets up, and we've got some beets that are germinated and coming up, and we got some beets that got froze. And the difficult thing is it's the weather was so cold last week, and we hit yesterday. It was a nice day, but it's cold out there again today.
I know it.
And
we're gonna freeze again this week.
Yeah. Oh, undoubtedly. And so we really won't be able to assess it. You can't assess the stand until they get up. And so we got a lot of beets that are under the ground, and I look at them and I look under them under a lens, and I go, yes, this one's. But I it's really hard to put a number to that until you see what actually makes it up.
Until you actually get a little bit more heat unit to get them up and moving. And what percentage of the beets right now are planted? Do you feel?
Not very many. It's for what's today, 17th. Yeah. For the 17th of April, it's the least amount of beets. 18th of April.
19th. We're the 19th.
19th. Man.
Okay. See, we're going along. We're not
definitely the least amount, lowest percent planted acres that I've seen in the Upper Snake for the 19th of April. Maybe 99 was close to this because we had a very wet spring.
Isn't the magic date kind of between the 5th and the 15th? Is that kind of the magical day, April?
Yeah, that's a really good window to plan in normally, but we're not making that. And there will be a little potential yield loss, but I really don't think it starts to, you don't start to see a big slide until we get out to the, you want them in by the 5th of May. Yeah. And you look back, I mean, these beets that were planted, I mean, they're not up yet. These guys haven't missed a lot of growing degree days. They really haven't. So it's the way the year is. But I've been telling my guys, when you kind of heard that conversation, I go, yeah, if we were the 5th of May or 5th of April, we might want to shut down in this wind. But where we are today, we're going to push it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. And because it's time to go.
It is. Well, and that's kind of where we're at all the way across the board.
It is,
And this weather for this year, from what we're seeing, is we're moving at least a week, to some areas even 3 weeks to 4 weeks behind what's happening.
Yeah, we're a solid 10 days behind in the beets.
Yeah. But they can pick that up.
Oh, absolutely.
Mother Nature's interesting that way.
Yeah, she is. I mean, we kind of had that same thing last year. I mean, the beets were struggling and stressed and kind of far behind, and then when that switch flipped, boy, we got the rows closed quick and started making sugar.
Let's talk a little bit about varieties.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about rotation and that. As far as your varieties goes, what type of inroads are we making? You're talking about some new stuff with the disease that we were talking about.
Yeah.
What other inroads? We still got the Roundup Ready.
Oh, yeah. Which, other than monogerm seed, that was the big game changer. Back in the 40s, some guy beet seed used to be in clusters. Okay. And so they would have to break the clusters apart to get a single seed. So that was very labor intensive, and they planted and thinned and it really, it was a game changer. This guy found this one plant out in the field that had single seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And man, he was, must have been smart enough to realize this could be very useful plant.
This is a good idea.
Yeah, so the genetics were taken and we got monogerm seed. Fast forward to, you know, the early 90s and as GMO crops were being, that technology was taking a hold.
Yep.
And the release of Roundup Ready sugar beets in 2008, I believe. Yep. And that was an absolute game changer. I mean, we were talking about 2007 when the co-op harvested 117,000 acres. Guys, the weed, between the weed issue and the market pressures, guys were about ready. The co-op was on, shaky ground, and Roundup Ready sugar beets came, and it's that technology in and of itself has just been incredible.
Well, I remember when they used to cultivate to try to keep the weeds out of them.
Yep.
Your chemicals were limited on what you could use.
Oh, prior to that, you planted and you ran a Betamix sprayer and you cultivated and you ran a Betamix sprayer and you cultivated and you ran a Betamix sprayer and you cultivated, and then you put a hoeing crew in. Hopefully only once, and hopefully it was less than $40 an acre. But it was chemical intensive, it was labor intensive,
and
machinery, and so we get Roundup, and of course, there's a lot of people have moved on beyond GMOs, but still a lot of people are hung up on GMOs and go, it's bad for the environment. And if you would have seen what I've seen in my lifetime, you would have go, this has been incredible for the environment. I mean, fuel savings alone, diesel savings alone. I mean, all those trips across the field, 3 to 4 cultivations and 3 to 4 sprays, 8 trips. Now it's 2 times across with a sprayer.
Yeah.
And no hand labor. Yeah. And where would we get the hand labor today to do it?
We'd struggle, wouldn't we?
We would. It would be so. That was amazing. Back in around 97 or 98, we had rhizomania come into the valley, and it was, at that time, it was the most devastating disease in the world. I can remember I was amalgamated. Jump in a little Cessna plane, and we had to fly in all the beet fields and look for the signs of rhizomania in the fields. I hated that job. It was hot and noisy, and I was sitting there looking down all the time, and we watched it over the years. We would, we began to fly, and we had one of the beet seed companies bring some rhizomania tolerance, and that was all of a sudden that changed everything, and we got we got past that, and nematodes, and we have rhizoc, and all of these things. They as these problems crop up, the seed companies and the breeders are usually one step ahead of it, and I'll credit the seed company that I work with. We sit down and in the fall, and they go, okay, what do we need to bring to help our customers? Because I mean, they realize too. I mean, just that discussion we had earlier. They've got to look down the road. Their sustainability depends upon our farmers' sustainability. And so it's really nice. They come to us and they go, what are you seeing? What do we need? What do these guys need to do? What does co-op need, and what do the growers need to be successful? And we're going to go to work on that. And they do. And it's
that is exciting.
It is.
So are they coming with something almost every year new as far as seed goes? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this CR Plus, this Cercospora trait has been the latest thing that's been brought in. And we're looking at 2-3 years down the road of having a new dicamba Liberty Link Roundup Ready sugar beet 3. Yeah, so you could go out there with dicamba, one application, and
have it.
Roundup, and it's cool technology. It really is, and Yeah, and that's how we're going to feed the world. That's how we're going to,
yes.
we're going to turn the corner on whatever is going on. I don't want to get political on climate, but
Yeah.
but we've seen sugar beet yields go from 30 to
Oh,
50 plus ton.
and that's some of the reason that you go further north in this country, they didn't have the yield.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing,
Regardless of what's causing it, there is climate change.
oh yes, well, you look at what we've got today.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
colder and hot, it changes, and each year seems to have a different challenge to it.
It does.
And that's exciting about the seed, that they're always working on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do they get funded? I mean, is that funded through the seed
Oh, the price of seed is not cheap.
So,
yeah, and so and I can't speak for other seed companies, but I know the one that I work with, they put a lot in. They've got more research going on. I mean, they're contributing a significant amount to research,
and that's what keeps them alive.
It is. That's why they're the #1 seed company in North America.
It keeps the grower and the co-op, and it keeps everybody moving along, because we got to keep moving ahead.
Yeah,
like you're saying.
It's that long-term vision.
Yes.
So
well, and the other thing that I can see, like you said, feed what we got to do to feed the world. Yeah. We keep losing farm ground.
We lose farm ground, so we got to get more out of what we got.
Yes.
No doubt about it. It's
talk a little bit about seed preparation as far as ground, getting ready for seed, going in, seed bed preparation, and some of those things.
So there's a lot of guys doing different things. I mean, the grower I was out at this morning, I mean, they worked it last fall, DMI'd it, and then put a lemkin in on it, and there's planting with a lemkin, and it's a really nice seed bed, a little soft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we used to have that, so my grandfather and my great grandfather, they got bladed off, and we had the old Milton planters, and so it had to be flat and it had to be firm, because it was that Milton was turned by ground friction.
Mm-hmm.
And so now with these these new John Deere's monosim planters, precision planters, and all the things that are out there to plant sugar beets with, it gives us and with we had to also have that firm and flat for cultivating, because we were close cultivate. I mean, we had those first pass of those cultivate discs were an inch either side of that beet.
Yeah, and if you missed that, you were tearing the whole row up.
Man, or if you made it too wide, you'd lose the weed control right where your beet was growing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's between the technology but a lot of guys are, we have a few guys that still plow and then run a packer across. A lot of guys are running a DMI, sometimes, a big ripper in the fall to open ground up, and then putting a packer on it in the spring. I have guys that are one pass with a packer in the spring. I deal with guys in fall and wheat that are 2 passes with a packer in the spring, or a lemkin and a packer, sometimes just a lemkin. But, they're trying to get. And we talked about seed to soil contact, which is critical in sugar beets, and that's another challenge in wheat. Is there's a lot of weed in there, you then all of a sudden now you don't get that good a seed to soil contact, and as long as, but you want that residue on top to keep it from blowing.
Yep.
So it's a fine line. We work the field and we go, it's a little too much residue to plant into, so let's make one more pass across it,
get that cleaned up.
But we don't want to put everything under there, because we don't want the beets to blow.
Yes.
And so, a lot depends on, what we're following. Potatoes are pretty easy. Rip them in the fall, pack them in the spring.
Because then you don't have all the.
Yep. You don't have to deal with all that stuff.
There's pros and cons on that part.
Yep.
So.
But like I say, we got great growers that are learning.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're talking about with the equipment too. It seems like we have advanced in the last 15, 20 years with equipment now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we sped up. We used to plant beets, at 2 mile an hour?
Yeah,
1.5,
2.5. Yeah,
two and a half. Now we've got these precision planters out there going to where placing the seed where we need it. In fact, I was listening to somebody talk about one that now has kind of got a moisture meter on it to give you kind of depth. It will actually adjust the depth up to whatever you tell it to according to the moisture.
Really, that ain't going to work for beets. I can tell you that. There's a lot of talk on speed planters, and we, You know, I mean, and I'll say this. I mean, you know, we've gone from 2.5 on the Milton. 3.5 is ideal with a John Deere or monosim. You can push it to 4, and there's planners out there, and there's this thought process that maybe we can go faster because. You know, that's the big thing in the Midwest is, well, we got to go fast.
Oh, yes.
We got to go fast.
We're speeding up to cover the acres.
We got to cover the acres. And it was kind of interesting. A good friend of mine, Rick Gertzenberger, he was the chairman of and I think he still is, or maybe, of Michigan Sugar. Mm-hmm. He came out here a few years ago and came down to this valley, and him and his wife and Maria and I, we spent some time together. But anyway, Rick wanted us to tour, and so we drove around the valley. Finally looks at me and he goes, "Where are all the big planters?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "The 24 row, the 36 row, the 48 row, the 60 row, sugar beet planters, corn planters." And I go, we have a few 24 rows. Most everything here is 12, Rick.
Yep.
And he goes, "I don't understand. How do you get your crop in?" And I go, "We load the drills up and we go up and down the fields." Mm-hmm. And he goes, "How many acres in this valley?" And I go, "Oh, like 38,000, something like that." And he goes, long story short, he goes, "I had 5 days to get my crop planted in Michigan last year in April.
Because of the
Weather.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I go, "Rick, we had 5 days. Maybe we couldn't."
So it makes a difference.
It makes a difference.
Huge difference.
And main lines and rock piles. I mean, he's out there in Michigan. It's just flat black dirt. Yes. You know, and the good Lord above provides what they need. Maybe not always at the right time, but
it makes a difference.
It makes a difference.
When your window is closer or shorter.
Yeah, you got to get them. So they try to bring that technology here and say, go fast. And I'm like, well, that's great. Put all your beets in 3 days and get froze.
At least
lose all your acres.
If you spread it out, you got
exactly. Yeah, it's a little better odds, you know. So
but spacing wise, are you seeing a lot of difference in? I know some guys are talking about some seed spacing according to soil types or according to what they're seeing.
We've seen we had that we have variable speed planters, and when they first came out, guys were pretty excited about it, and to a certain extent, I've seen it where, over White Rocky Knolls out on the reservation out by Bannock Peak, or by on the Arbon exit in Truckersville. There's some really white, tough dirt there, and so guys were bumping the spacing going over the White Knolls and kept fields from being replanted. Generally speaking, most everybody sets their spacing between 5. We got a few guys at a 5, more guys at 5 1/4. 5 1/4 to 5 1/2 is the sweet spot in this valley. I would say 75% of the growers in this valley are planting between 5 and 5, 5 1/4 and 5 1/2. And the other 25%, 10% of them are a little closer, and the other 15% are 5 1/2 to 5 3/4. I think there's 2 or 3 guys that are still out there at 6, but not very many. No.
And then you're shooting for that 1/2 inch all the way through.
Yeah, 1/2 inch to 3/4. Yeah. If you get over 3/4, it's just wave goodbye.
It just doesn't come through.
Make sure you got the replant insurance guy's number handy, because you're probably going to need it.
Well, I know, watching a little bit too after planting now, we've got some guys that are going in and doing some dammer diking, and obviously you had mentioned that earlier.
Right.
Dammer diker on there. What are the benefits? I know in buds we see it because we're gathering the moisture. I'm sure it's kind of the same thing with beets. Do you see it in certain soil types that is more beneficial than others?
So soil types, not so much. More, again, ground that's sloped. Mm-hmm. And so, we used to, in the potato industry, we used to go and dammer dike in late June and early July. And those guys, man, they get them planted, and then they turn around and get the chemical on, and they get them diked.
Yeah.
And then the spuds come up, and we have a great crop. And so, but just 5 years ago, we had 5-6 years ago, we had guys going through and diking just before the rows closed in beets, because water was running, and you drive out and the beets are laying down flat, suffering. You look at soil and you look at that first foot, That's where all the groceries are at, my friend. That's where the N and the P and the K and zinc and magnesium. I mean, that first foot, that's the grocery. That's where the groceries are at. And the plants know that. And so when sugar beets come up and they get those roots out there and they go get those groceries. Well, then we were coming in July and pulling a ripper through there, and we were closing the cupboard door. Yep. So a friend of mine, a grower up here, and of course there was all sorts of challenges out here in this white desert dirt. The water would pivot to go around, the water would run off of the knoll, and so I had an idea, and he had the shop and the equipment to turn it into a reality, and developed what we call a little diker that goes on the planter, and you know, I was his crop consultant, and we're still just, you know, he's one of my very best friends, we came up with this thing, and the field man from Amalgamated Sugar come out there and he saw it and he goes, well, I think everybody ought to have one of these. So he started sending guys out there. Well, we gave him would give growers, you know, Terry, give them here, go build it. And they were, you know, like, oh, that's not what they wanted to do.
They want you to build it.
Well, right. Well, I had a son-in-law who was managing a machine shop down in Boise. He was a shop foreman down there, 22 guys working for him. That's a great machine shop. I mean, water jet tables and brakes and iron workers. And I mean, it was really cool. Well, he come up for Christmas that fall, and I said, I got some guys that want these built. I threw it in his pickup, and I said, take it back to Boise and see if they can. Well, long story short, I mean, we've got them on over 200 planters in 5 or 6 states.
And they're seeing some good benefits out of that because of water retention.
And we're putting the dikes in as we plant.
Yeah, so you don't have to come back in.
We don't have to come back in and tear those roots out. I mean, we had a side-by-side. We had a grower in Pleasant Valley, and a side-by-side. He planted half of a 2 John Deere Max, same beet seed variety, planted half with the diker, the other half without. And it was such a shocking difference on May 24th, the two sides. It was incredible. And Amalgamated came up and looked at it, and we ended up taking it to harvest. There's 4.2 tons difference.
Wow.
And about 0.2 of a point sugar.
That's
and
huge.
It was huge. And everybody, you know, God bless Wade Povey. Every grower that drove by that would call him and say, what did you do different there? And he'd just say, you need to call Jim. So, it was.
Well, that's neat to see it.
Yeah.
To develop something like that and to see that kind of
it
result.
is. It's and you know, and again, I mean, we were going through and you know, that extra pass with the tractor. I mean, you look at what tractors cost, what their cost to run per hour, and the price of fuel right now.
Exactly.
That's a no-brainer. If it's
and it goes back to that. You talk about the environment too.
Right.
Everybody's talking about carbon footprint right now.
Yeah.
Every time you put that tractor in the field, it's another chunk of stuff going in the air.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Even though we're cleaning it up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're doing the things that you know, and agriculture gets a lot of heat, but we're doing more than any other industry, undoubtedly.
And I think people recognize
I think so. I hope so.
And that's probably one of the things that we want to really help with what we're doing with these podcasts is to kind of put out there, you know, this is what we are doing.
Yeah.
And we're doing things that are helping the environment, feeding the world.
Yeah.
And doing those things.
Yeah, we
it's
need
important.
to. It is, and it's an important message to get out. And you know, over the years, we've been poor ambassadors for our industry. All of us have. Yeah. We've not done. We've
been worried about what we're doing.
We were worrying about feeding the world and not worrying about telling the world how we're doing it. And they have a right to know.
They do.
They're going to eat it. They're going to sit down and eat it. They have a right to know what we're doing to make it safe. To make the environment and you know it's you know and I've got a sister in San Francisco. Oh, God bless her. But you know she gets caught up in all that stuff, and I go, you know what? I go to the cellar down the road and I feed those potatoes to my kids. That's how it is safe.
It is.
We eat it every day.
Well, and we want to make it safe because we're all involved.
We're all involved, and and they talk about big farmers, but they're just family farmers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody here is a family farmer, and they're raising their kids here, and they look down the road, and they want the farm to be sustainable, and their kids to have their grandkids. Yeah, I know my great grandfather's very pleased that I still live on my family farm that he bought back in the 40s, 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a message we need to be better at getting out.
We do. Yep. Well, I know one of the things we kind of chatted a little bit about before we came in was a little bit about strip till.
Yeah.
That's kind of Europe sounds like is doing a little of that, and of course it sounds like you've had a little experience with. Maybe explain a little of what you've seen and some of your.
So strip till kind of was, kind of a hot topic 10, 12 years ago. And Amalgamated was doing some research on it. One of the guys by the name of Kerry Bone was doing some research with it and running on his farm with some mixed results. We had a guy in the Auburn area jump in. He was like, I'm going to do this. He had some highly erodible soil, some sand, and it was blowing out on him and stuff. But I'm doing the whole farm. Bought a strip tiller. He was, go big or go home.
Yep.
And he went big. And there were definitely some challenges there. I shared with you on Memorial Day weekend, I was walking beet fields saying, yep, we got to replant this one. Yep. I mean, you give up some yield, and at the virtual Sugarbeet school that was hosted by Amalgamated Sugar and the University of Idaho this winter, they talked about that. There is some yield loss there. When you talk about environmentally positive action, yes, strip tilling has some benefits. But from a crop production point of view, it doesn't do doesn't do you a lot of good if you're not making money. I mean, again, if we have all these millions of acres that are under the watchful hand of growers who are going broke, then it doesn't do anybody any good. It's not good for the environment. We need our growers to be successful, and so there are definitely places for strip till. I shared with you, I got a grower up in Raft River, Ken, who's, was a bulldog about it. He was so horizontally challenged that he didn't have a lot of choices, mm-hmm. and he's got it figured out. And there are guys that there are places for it. And I will say this: strip till is not an option without Roundup Ready beets,
and that's you've got to. Well, and a lot of them are using the cover crop to do
right.
that.
I love cover crops. Jim Davis was a University of Idaho extension agent back in the early 80s. I'm thinking I started working with him on cover crops in 1984. Oh, yeah. I still sell cover crops today. I love them.
And now it's becoming bigger and bigger as we go along.
It's a great, I mean, when the thing that caught my attention back when I was a little younger than I am now was when we raise, whether it's a sugar beet crop or a potato crop or a wheat crop, we collect the energy from the sun and we turn it into food. Yep. And so when we take the wheat off, that sun hits the ground and no energy is captured. And that's a lot of energy.
Yes.
Let's put a cover crop out there.
Yep.
Let's grab that energy and then let's put that energy back into the soil. It'll help organic matter, which helps water infiltration, which helps water holding capacity, which helps drought tolerance. And then we're going to have slow release of nitrogen. And so we're going to have a more even, and the guys that use these cover crops, and now we have nematode trap crops. So if we've got nematode issues, we can go in there and we can trick them into a generation cycle that they can't complete. And very humane, not cruel, for my sister in San Francisco. But, agriculture keeps evolving and there's so many great tools out there. And the unfortunate part about it in the dry conditions we are now, our cover crop sales, guys were like, I don't have water. Guys that love to put cover crops in had to cut back. So we need Mother Nature and the good Lord to keep blessing us with some more moisture. And so we can continue to do things the way that we'd like to do and we need to do.
Yes. What any suggestions going through the end of this year now? Kind of what you're seeing, kind of what you kind of anticipate. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the disease that we need to kind of look at, but maybe some of your last thoughts on what to kind of expect, or what you're kind of thinking that we need to be looking at for this coming year. Of course, I'm asking that with
this is a loaded question. It's like, I saw some big Sputnik equipment loaded on a truck, and this question is more loaded than
the truck.
Than the truck, yeah. So obviously, I mean, our first goal is to get an adequate stand of beets. We need 150 to 175 beets to maximize our production. We need to get it as soon as possible. And once we've got the stand, we need to get those leaves. We need to get those rows closed as soon as possible. Root maggots always a threat. Cutworms. If you're following grain crop or a residue crop, when you got about 15-20% of your beets up, you need to start watching for cutworm. And we have a lot of guys that go out and get a pyrethroid on. We were talking about strip tilling. That was a huge factor in strip tilling, because when guys worked the ground, they killed the cutworms. Yeah. And that grower I was walking in Memorial Day weekend, those cutworms came out and wiped him out real quick. And so we've got the cutworm issue, and then we've got root maggots, which continue to plague us in North Pleasant Valley through Aberdeen. But we're learning to deal with that. The loss of lures, man, is going to impact us. It was a very good insecticide for root maggots, and so that's one of the things guys are going to want to keep an eye on is without that tool, they're going to need to be a little more vigilant about what they do. And I will say this, these guys, if you got lower span over, please don't use it on your sugar beets. That's off label. Yeah, please don't. It's not worth it. Use it somewhere else, but not on sugar beets. Not on sugar or potatoes. Yeah, don't use it there. Don't forget, it's important. And then we just grow sugar beets. That's what I loved about sugar beets.
Then we're on the roll.
You know what? If the pump went down and they willed it down, it wasn't a big deal. If you're a spud grower, you're having a heart attack. And beets are
they're pretty. Once you get into that stage, they're pretty healthy.
They're forgiving.
Lively. So
and then in the fall, about the end of July, 1st of August, you better be paying attention to the weather. If we get that period where we've got nights over 60, daytime highs in the 80s to upper 80s, and we've got humidity, man, you better get something on, because Cercospora is in your field. I promise you, it's there.
Especially after last year.
Yep, absolutely. And it's just waiting for those conditions to come. We got by last year. It came late enough, and we were on top of it enough that we didn't really see what it can do. But there was a grower, and I think a couple growers anyway, 14, 15 ton, 13, 14 sugar. This is down in Parma where we raise 40, 45 plus tons.
Yeah.
So Cercospora is real, and it can really be devastating.
Really put on the list right now to watch.
Absolutely. So, and then don't put too much nitrogen on late, and if you've got too much nitrogen in that third foot, take it away from your beet, and you can do that by drying down that third foot in August when Cercospora's around.
And that'd help that actually.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yep. Yeah. So it's win-win.
Good recommendation.
So thank you.
Well, Jim, we sure appreciate you coming today.
Absolutely, Brent.
And spending time with us.
It's been fun visiting with you. I've enjoyed it. So.
Well, I've enjoyed it too. And we want to thank everybody that has joined us here today and kind of learned a little bit more about sugar beets and had a good conversation about that.